flags that are there are all inscripted with Tibetan prayers, Om Mani Padme Om. And the idea is the prayer flags fly at the tops of mountains and in sacred and auspicious places, and the breeze catches the flags and takes the prayers from the flags and carries the prayers around the world. Well, we had a different sort of prayer flag with us. We had prayer flags that each represented someone whose life had been affected by cancer. And about half of the prayer flags represented lives that had been lost to cancer. And the prayer flag project started with Chris. So Chris is forever 22. It was my honor and horror to be one of his doctors. Chris was a student at Grinnell when he died of his cancer, and I'd been one of his doctors for about 2 years. By the time Chris died, he was nearly paraplegic, but he was still embracing life with the passion and gusto he always did. He had been gone for about a year when it was in the Des Moines Register that I was going to take a group of cancer survivors, and that morning, the paper couldn't have been in his dad's hands for more than 10 minutes. His dad called and said, you know, Chris would be all over this. And I said, I know, Chris is going with me. And out of that conversation, I realized that it would be really valuable if we could have some physical representation of someone going up the mountains with us. So we came up with the prayer flag concept. And this was the prayer flag that Chris's parents made for Chris. And I just want to share with you what Chris's dad wrote on the prayer flag. And I do that because this prayer flag really represents what you all do with the luminaria, how you remember people. And what the prayer flag has really allowed us to do is it allows people to take the time to remember and to say things that they might not have said if they didn't have the opportunity. And encourage you when you write the luminaria to think about what that person represents and to pay tribute. This is what Chris's dad wrote on the prayer flag for Chris. I remember your childhood so vividly as you delved into the world with curiosity and gusto. You were interested in everything, weren't content to know just a little, and asked a million probing questions each day. As you grew, your curiosity turned inward to yourself and outward to those around you. You pushed yourself and those you touched to learn new things, master new talents, and to live with passion, not with an external reward in mind, but rather for the pure love of knowledge and self-fulfillment. As you grew into a young man, I marveled at your intelligence and talent, was inspired by your humanity and kindness, and was in awe of your humor and your charm. You were in command of your world, and you shared it with those around you. Even after your illness stole your physical strength, your heart remained full of life, compassion, and joy. By what grace I had a son like you, I can never know, but for it I will be eternally grateful. My prayer for you is that your soul continues to soar as it did in life. For myself, I pray that someday I may be half the man that you were. And I can tell you that Chris soared that day on Mount Everest, and he went on to soar again on Kilimanjaro. And Sid did too. This is a prayer flag I carry for Sid Krebs. Sid was a patient of mine we lost about 4 years ago. And Sid's daughter Amy lives here in Carroll, and made this flag for her dad. And Sid's on horseback here. And it said, "It broke our hearts to lose you, but you didn't go alone, for part of us went with you the day God called you home." And Sid and Chris and many, many others were in my backpack and went with me to the tops of the mountain and flew along with hundreds of others. So this is the day at Everest Base Camp when we got all the flags out of our backpacks and strung them up and put them on a pole. And that became the centerpiece for our Relay for Life at Everest Base Camp. So we made a perimeter, not really a well-worn track, and we did 4 laps on our Relay for Life. The first lap was for survivors. At this point, there were 13 cancer survivors at Everest Base Camp, 18,000 feet, circling these flags, flying with Mount Everest in the background and the flags above us. The second lap we did was for the caregivers, and at this point, we were all caregivers, and our Sherpas and our porters joined in on the caregivers lap. And then we did a lap that represented remembrance, remembering Chris and Sid and my mom and countless others that were there with us in spirit as we journeyed. This is Hero. Hero even did the lap with us. Hero's a stray dog that wanders up and down the Khumbu at Everest Base Camp. And I can tell you there's no dog food at Everest Base Camp, but he's not without food. Like all of us, he gets by with a little help from some friends. That day at Everest Base Camp, that day for the Relay for Life, Kathy had a really difficult time. And if I showed you the film, Kathy, like almost on cue, fell flat over like 5 feet before the tent at the end of our trip, like she had done dozens of times before. I got up and I'm okay. But she and Hero bonded that morning, and they were very playful with each other and kind of picked up her spirits. But Hero joined in with us on our journey as we did the Relay for Life. And obviously the last lap was Fight Back, where we recognize that those that have gone before us, their death will not have been in vain, that they will inspire, in fact demand of us, that we do our part to reduce the burden of cancer, to create a world with less cancer and more birthdays. So we packed up our stuff after one last group photo at Everest Base Camp, and we headed down the mountain. And that next night, we were in the in a little lodge, and we're reflecting back on what the journey meant. And one of our writers that was with us reflected on this, and he was up that night. Like many of us, you don't sleep really well at altitude. You gotta pee a lot because you're taking a drug that makes that happen to help reduce. And he was up and doing some writing and blogging, and he told the story. As he's up, he looks down the hallway of the lodge that night, and he sees something. And he looks again, closely, and there in the hallway of the lodge is a dog sleeping. The same dog that had been with us doing the Relay for Life. And he noted that the dog was sleeping outside of Kathy's room in what he describes as a hallway filled of heroes. And we continued on down the mountain. We came back to Des Moines, and anybody's flown out of Des Moines recognizes the escalator. And we come back to Des Moines, and remember, before coming down the escalator, we all got together and we let everybody go ahead of us because we knew there was going to be an assembled group down there, and talked a little bit about what this journey meant. And I said, I'm not going to tell you what this journey meant. You'll figure it out, but I just want to share with you that no matter why we were on this journey, whether we were on this journey because we were a cancer survivor or a caregiver or a family member that none of us should think of this as a journey that we deserved or earned. It was truly a blessing, and that we need to treat it as a blessing. And as we go down the escalators and engage in our life again, we should find the Sherpa within us to reach out to those less fortunate and provide generosity and compassion, and to do what we can to create a better world with less cancer and more birthdays. And you know, we're still thinking about what the journey represents. A little epilogue. This is Kathy and Ang Lakpa. And about 8 weeks after we're back, I get a phone call, my cell phone. I look down and there are lots of numbers on my cell phone. And I think, this has got to be an international call. And I answer, and at the other end is Dr. Dick, Dr. Dick. And it's Lakpa, Ang Lakpa's husband. He says, Dr. Dick, Ang Lakpa has leukemia. And at that point I just said, Lakpa, we can help, we can help. I had no idea what type of leukemia. I can tell you 95% of people who get cancer in Nepal just die without ever knowing they have cancer. So the fact that she knew she had cancer, and over the next days we found out that she had a type of leukemia that's incurable, but is treatable with an oral medication that costs $40,000 a year in a country where the average income is $250 a year. And so our group, Above and Beyond Cancer, were able to talk to the drug manufacturer, provide her with drug for the rest of her life. Once a month, she goes in and gets a blood test and gets a month of medication. It takes 2 weeks for her to walk from her village to the hospital to get the blood test. So our group has also provided once a month plane fare so that she can fly from Lukla, the most dangerous airport in the world, to Kathmandu to get her blood test and get her drugs. A month after that, Kathy was diagnosed with recurrence. And months after that, Lynette was diagnosed with recurrence. And one's journey never ends, and one doesn't know just what's in store. But the ability to get through this, the ability for our group to then provide assistance for Ang Lakpa, it's hard not to think that Ang Lakpa was the reason we were on this journey. That's the end of the Everest journey. It was just going to be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And as we told the story, it just resonated so much that nobody wanted it to end. So part 2 was this January, took a group of 19 cancer survivors to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,341 feet. 19 survivors, 11 women, 8 men, ages 29 to 73, including a 72-year-old Catholic priest who had recurrent cancer, delayed his cancer treatment so he could climb the mountain, made it to the top at age 72, a 69-year-old guy with incurable cancer, 2 artificial knees and an artificial hip, and he got his sorry butt behind all the way to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. Just amazing. A 63-year-old farm woman who'd never hiked a day in her life made it to the summit. A 42-year-old woman with incurable leukemia on oral chemotherapy made it to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. You don't have a clue what you can do in life until you give it a try. So I encourage all of you, reach for something beyond what you know you can attain. 275,000? No, 350. You know, you don't know what you can accomplish till you give it a try. And you know, and then share your journeys. Become generous and compassionate. And I don't need to teach you about generosity and compassion. I'm in the home of generosity and compassion here in Carroll. And I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be part of this. Thank you for the mountain. Thank you for letting me share this journey. After the ceremony's over, if anyone wants to, I've got a sneak peek at a video from Mount Kilimanjaro that I'll share after the ceremony is over for anybody who wants to. But I just want to thank you again for the honor of being able to speak at the #1 Relay for Light in the entire country. Thank you so much.